Hey, Brian here. Before we get started today, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Home Service Freedom event at freedomevent.com. You really want to check this one out. If you're an owner or manager, I say this all the time. We need to be at conventions every year, rubbing shoulders with the top people in our industries every year. But if you're a technician or a salesperson, the first conference I actually went to was like 2006. It was put on by Jim Abrams, and there was like Lou Holtz was there and some pretty cool names at the time, and all the speakers in our industry who've kind of turned over now. But it was like mind blowing to me. I got to meet top producers in the industry who were doing revenue that I couldn't even dream about. And it gave me this view into the world where I'm like, I'm not doing enough. But it really was life changing. And it's a memory. Every one of these things that I go to is a memory that I would never trade for the amount of money I spend to go. So I actually go to like 3 to 5 conferences a year now. But this one's my favorite every year, the Freedom event that's put on by Tommy Mello. You'll see some of the top producers really in the history of our industry in terms of sales and revenue. But you'll also meet some of the biggest guests to be on the Waste No Day podcast. I'll be there. Tommy Mello, Ken Goodrich, Tom Howard will be there, and Chad Peterman, Aaron Gaynor, Ellen Rohr. I feel like I'm leaving some people out, and I feel bad for that, but there's so many people going to be there, and you have the opportunity to meet almost all of them and have a conversation with them. And they're always so free and sharing to help with your business or you running your calls or whatever it is. Also, Jocko Willink's going to be speaking. That's going to be awesome. I'm going to be there trying to get next to him and get him on the Waste No Day podcast. So if you happen to be there, help out with that too. Anyway, Nate and I kind of made a deal with Tommy Mello and his crew that we are putting the referral fee for this back into the discount. So we have as much of a discount as we could possibly offer you. We get nothing for recommending this. So go to freedomevent.com, and in the discount code, if you punch in WND Freedom 2024, that's WND like Waste No Day, Freedom 2024, you will get as big a discount as you can possibly get on the tickets. Hope to see you all there. See ya.
It's time for us to wake up and say, you know what? The only thing that separates me from them is, number one, they made a decision that they were going to get good at it. And number two, they stuck with it long enough until they mastered it. That's it.
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your hosts, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your host, Nate and Brian, hanging out with you again and looking forward to a great episode. You better get your seatbelt on because we are going to bring in some motivation to you today. Mr. Doug Wyatt, president of Synergy Incorporated, is going to be joining us today. He is a professional speaker, content creator, and so much more. And we're going to have a great conversation with him. In fact, I think it's going to be a two-parter, Brian. But we'll just keep that one under the hat for now because we are focused in on what he's going to be bringing us. And of course, before we do that, as we always do, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking to you ourselves. Brian, what's our quote for today?
When you feel as though you can't do something, the simple antidote is action. Begin doing it. Start the process, even if it's just a simple step, and don't stop at the beginning. Marcus Buckingham.
Absolutely, man. And, you know, I'm sure we can all relate to a scenario in our lives where we had to do something, even though we could not necessarily foresee ourselves actually accomplishing whatever it may be. And that for some of you, that may be waking up a little bit earlier in the morning. For some of you, that may have been, you know, finding that girl and walking up to her and asking for her number. For some of you, that may have been something very serious and significant, like, you know, dealing with a death in your family and having to overcome significant obstacles or learning disabilities or whatever it may be. But we have all had scenarios in our lives where we have had to make a choice that we are going to choose one step forward. Even if it's 6 inches forward, we will make that forward direction happen. Great way to start it off, Brian.
Yeah. What a lot of I'm just about to hit the 1 year mark with the Phoenix team. And for everyone in there, everyone on that team, it was their first time role playing when I got there. And it was funny because Jack in particular, we were talking about this recently. He goes, I had never role played before. I was like, what? He just crushed it. I mean, it was like, are you kidding me? I was like, man, you know my content pretty well. No. He's a natural. He's a gifted communicator. Extremely. I've said this before, and I'll make sure he never hears this episode because I'd never pay him this big a compliment. Probably the most natural talent that I've ever trained.
Whoa. High praise.
He's going to do big things, bro. So that process is like putting that one foot in front of the other and just doing something. It's like, come on up here and tell me your name. Like, I'm new here. You guys know each other, but I'm brand new. So I'm going to tell you about me, but come on up here and tell me and the rest of us a little something about you. It's just speaking, right? At first to get used to role playing, but you have to do something. So it's why, like, when I'm training guys to break their walls down and get better at breaking the ice and get better at communication outside of the shop, I'm telling them, start with something small. Like when you go pay for your gas at the gas station, go in and go up to the counter and pay for it and just find out who the person, what city the person behind the counter was born in. Very simple, very low risk, easy hurdle to leap. But man, when you've never done stuff like this, you just stayed in your shell, it's the majority of us as technicians. This is who we are. And I mean the majority. There's a couple people in their driver's seat listening right up. Please, like, that's nothing. Believe me, you're the minority. The majority of us struggle with things like that. I did. In my 20s, I did. So going up and getting a piece of information like that is a big hurdle for some people. It's low risk, though. There's nothing bad going to happen. They're paid to be there to be nice to you. And then later on, now you do it to somebody who's pumping gas beside you, right? It's a little higher risk. And then you do it to what Lance always made me do, was like, find out these 3 things about the waiter. I'm like, yeah, no problem. He's like, no, not our waiter. That waiter over there, other side of the restaurant. I'm like, oh, bro, now that's high risk because they're like, I don't make any money off you. Like, why are you talking to me, bro? I'm trying to serve my tables here. I'm trying to carry all these cups without dropping one. Like, and you're bothering me trying to find out, whether my parents are married. Always some stupid, corny piece of information to find out that he just made it difficult to get to, right? Like, it was always up high. It was never just like, hey, how old are you? It was just a little higher, out of reach. You really had to push.
Absolutely. And those types of experiences that you've had, Brian, and I'm sure listeners can relate to it in whatever areas of life you've been in, where that push has proven you into a new level of maturity, into a new level of understanding, a new level of expertise, a new level of confidence, that you were able to break through barriers. You were able to set a new floor. You were able to grow. And that's something that, like, even as I get older, it's like, sometimes I find myself asking, am I still capable of like significant change? Am I still capable of being able to like learn new things? Or have I gotten so stuck in my ways that, I've eliminated or really atrophied that portion of myself? And so it's good to challenge yourself and to position yourself in areas of discomfort, or, as Brian said, putting that step forward in whatever direction is, and preferably or most desirably in an area that would be less comfortable for you. These are things that encourage us to keep growing and remind us that we can get better. We can waste no day. We can choose to improve ourselves. And I know that Doug is going to bring great content to that degree on our conversation today.
Oh, yeah, buddy. Doug is a beast, man. I went to lunch with him and just kind of got into his training a little bit. Actually, we started we'll probably talk about it with him, but we started in our training room. He wanted to swing by and see the shop because he listens to the show. He's seen some of the videos and stuff online. He wanted to swing by and see the training room. And on that wall, we have 16 objections written. And when we do our Objections Olympics, one of us will just grab the phone and say, hey, Siri, pick a number between 1 and 16. And the guy standing in front of the room, whatever number Siri calls out, the customer goes with that objection and the tech has to overcome it. So he was excited to see that stuff, but then he kind of got into his training. I was like, oh crap, this guy's a monster. Where'd you come from?
Yes. And in fact, I believe as this episode airs, Brian, you've already posted his Wiser Wednesday that he did for you. You can find that in the Waste No Day Facebook group. But I know you got a lot of incredible feedback from your team.
It was awesome. So Wiser Wednesday, every Wednesday, I'll do 10 minutes of training. I started it for my team. I was just bringing guests from the podcast on via Zoom to train our team. Well, a few people asked if they could join, and I'm like, yeah, Zoom in. And then I just started releasing the Zoom link in the Facebook group, and now dozens of teams will Zoom in, and then I'll edit the video and drop it in the Waste No Day Facebook group, and people can watch it later. But none of them have gone more than maybe an hour and 10 minutes, except this one. Any shop that was slow, any tech that didn't have somewhere to be was welcome to stay, and he kept going for 3 hours and 19 minutes.
Wow. Record.
He was role playing like crazy. Dude, it was legit.
Yes. And like I said, I know you got tons of feedback from your team about like, who is this guy? And like, where has he been all my life? And that's really exciting. And that's why we're super excited to bring Doug on the show today. I know that you're going to love it. I was impressed with the conversations we got to have, and I'm excited for you to also have that privilege as well. But
yeah, it's going to be fun.
Before we do, Brian, it is time to highlight yet again another amazing reviewer of the Waste No Day podcast. Who do we have on today?
Hey, before we do, let's quick mention the Waste No Day
boot camp. Yeah,
buddy. Waste No Day boot camp coming at you. November 23rd, November 24th, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Can fly in like Thursday night, chill, take a vacation day. On Friday, see the sights out in Phoenix. It's at the Wild Horse Pass Casino in Chandler, Arizona. Yeah, it's going to be a good time. We're going to walk through my exact sales process, work through it together, the one that I train my teams. And then we are going to end with some legit Objections gauntlet role play. And we're going to make sure that everyone leaves ready to overcome the top objections that our industry sees. Role playing with me, role playing with some other good techs, good salespeople in our industry. Hopefully make some awesome memories because, again, I talked about this before, but I want to model this after Tom Hopkins boot camp. That was the first real sales training I ever went to. And it's my favorite that I ever went to. And, you know, I don't know if it was the best, but it probably was. But the nostalgia there, just the feeling that I have when I think back on it, the humiliation of it, the nerves, the anxiety. But what it changed me into more than anything is like, it's epic. And hopefully this is what we can build out of this thing. So this is going to be the first class. The first class is going to get a little bit special treatment, some plaques, some first team graduates. And yeah, we'll have a good time together. We'll get busy though. It's going to be a gauntlet. And I'm going to tell you for those that show up, we're only doing 50 for this first one. We're going to try to keep it pretty contained. So 50 people are going to be able to join us. For those who come, don't plan on making this your Vegas weekend. Don't plan on drinking heavily and being hungover. Like, this ain't that. You don't have the time and capacity for that. I'm going to put the screws to you, like for real. I mean, it's a lot to learn in a short amount of time. And I can train it well, so it's training it forever. So it's easy to digest in a short amount of time, but you really got to have your game on. Like, you got to be ready to go. Get a lot of sleep. Be ready to roll.
Very exciting, Brian. And I know that's going to be an amazing opportunity. Like he mentioned, only 50 seats available. So make sure that you are one of those lucky few that are getting in on the very first Waste No Day Bootcamp. It's going to be awesome. And let me tell you what else is awesome. That special time of the week where we highlight one of our reviewers. Brian, who do we have on today?
Insanely beneficial. 5 stars. I've listened to Waste No Day for a couple years now. I haven't been able to listen to every episode, but the ones I have, there is always something beneficial to take from them. Brian and Nate are the best, and I recommend them to everyone and anyone trying to better their craft. Thanks, Brian and Nate. Stark MN.
I mean, he could be talking about all natural sleep aids, you know, like he puts us on to fall asleep at night when he can't,
I get behind that. Yeah.
There's a lot of bests that we don't really want to be top category in, Brian. I don't know. Just saying.
Yep. Sometimes Amelia's restless. She's not sleeping so well. I'm like, you want me to put Waste No Day on, Dave? And she falls asleep because I ask her. She just zonks right out.
It must be that late night AM radio DJ voice.
Yeah. FM for the record. But yeah.
Is it FM?
Yeah.
I think, irregardless, it's fine.
Yeah. I think it's FM. Well, now I got to go find out. All right. I'm gonna go.
Let's get Chris back on. We'll do an entire episode.
Let's get Chris Voss part 3 on. All right. Let's wrap this up so I can go listen to part 2 again and find out if it was FM or AM.
Well, we appreciate you who left the review. Thank you so much for doing that. And we appreciate you even giving us a shout out. It's very kind, makes our day. So thank you for doing that. And if you too have a desire to promote the show and to express your gratitude for the things that you've learned on here with the amazing guests that we have on, be sure to leave us a review. Let us know which episode was most impactful for you and how it has changed your life, your system, your process, or even your family. We'd love to hear it. And we know the next thing that you're going to love to hear is the voice, the sweet voice of Doug Wyatt, as we take time to put him in your passenger seat. Our guest today is Doug Wyatt. He is the president at Synergy Incorporated, a professional speaker, content creator, mindset and professional development expert, and certified 7 Habits instructor, with also adding to his resume award-winning entrepreneur. Doug was raised in humble beginnings in the Ozark Mountains in southwest Missouri. His small-town upbringing with big-time values has proven to resonate within the sales and business community. While earning his bachelor's degree from the University of Colorado Business School, he started a sales and marketing company that has rapidly expanded across the western United States. The first experience in business then led Doug into his late 20s with partnerships operating 9 franchise restaurants in Denver, Colorado. He made transitions into the trades and has operated on the contractor side twice, and now has an incredible learning platform that I'm sure we'll be asking him questions about. Very excited for this one. He is a powerful speaker indeed, and we're looking for some motivation today. So wake us up, Doug. Welcome here, buddy.
Hey, guys. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Nate. Appreciate you guys having me on. I tell you what, it's an honor to be here. I am just thrilled and impressed with what the two of you are doing for the trade. So honored to join all of the ones that have preceded me and certainly all the great guests you'll have after me.
We appreciate that, buddy.
Thanks, Doug. That makes one of us.
Yeah.
Well, it's true.
Good to see you again. Doug came out last week as this records last week and took me to lunch, and we got to hang out a bit, came and toured the shop. We just did some impromptu objections role play in our training room. Like, let's go, we had a good time.
Yeah, there's nothing like buttering up one of the hosts. I wish Nate could have been there. You guys probably be easier on me today. But
no, you don't. You just don't know any better. You would have made the role play take a lot longer.
Well, it was great getting to know you a little bit better, Brian, both of you. I think at this point, I got the invite to come on this show a little over a month ago. I had heard about you guys shortly before that from a mutual friend of ours that's been listening. And I think I'm nearly caught up. I've in the last month or two, I think I've listened to every episode except about the last 20% twice. So
wow.
I got a good feel for Waste No Day. You guys are doing special things.
On behalf of us, we apologize. Sincerely.
Sincerely.
Nobody should have to listen to that many episodes in a row.
Well, I'll tell you this, one of my things in my life is I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm not the smartest, but my entire life, I think Dwayne The Rock Johnson stole my saying. I always just want to be the hardest worker in the room. And sometimes I got to listen to something, write it down, study it 3, 4, 5 times before it starts to stick. So I'm not the smartest. I just tend to outwork people. So that's how I roll.
Kim Jong-un actually has recordings of Brian that he plays in his torture chambers. And people just have to listen to over and over again.
They're so motivated by the time they pass, though.
Well, you know what, guys? I will just say this. I have a little hack, and my hack is that I listen to you guys at 2x. And typically listen. I'm on Spotify, so everything's at 2x. So I get to listen to each of your podcasts in half the time and twice as much. So it's good.
All right. Well, we appreciate that, Doug. It's not often we have a listener or a guest on, I should say, who has listened to so many episodes, but that's a great start.
In such a short time at that.
In such a short time, for sure.
I feel like I found my brothers from another mother.
Well, it's good to have you on, Doug. And we are excited to talk about communication. Speaking of a lot of the episodes that we've done and a lot of topics that we've covered, communication often comes up in one way or another, sometimes more than other times. But tonight or today in this episode, we're going to be focusing on it specifically around the concept of avoiding conflict. But before we do that, as I'm sure you're well aware, since you've listened to well over 100 episodes of us doing this, we do like to have a little bit of an understanding of who you are and kind of your background a little bit. We read the bio kind of on the way in here, but kind of want to hear it from the horse's mouth. Like, who are you? What are you about? What are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I'll start way back, and I'll try not to make this last too long, but I think it's relevant. I grew up in a small town in Southwest Missouri, kind of at the north end of the Ozark Mountains. And what I learned growing up was that hard work was what would get you somewhere. And I think that's where I developed my work ethic. My father would get my brother and I, Chris, up before sun up, and we'd work past sundown. And, I took some things from the countryside, and those things were honor, character, and integrity. And I like to say that with what I do now in the trades, those three principles are what I live my life by in every process, or sales process, leadership process, call center, whatever it might be. That's what runs throughout. I knew I wanted more, though, than what I was getting in that small town. I grew up working on tractors and changing my own brakes and transmissions. And, sometimes when you work with a good old boy like my father was, it's not always enjoyable. I know a lot of us might have fond memories of working out in the garage or on furnaces, air conditioners, plumbing projects, and electrical panels with our dads. I'm going to be honest with you and say that wasn't it for me. I have some mechanical skills, but a service manager of mine at one of my HVAC companies, his name's Chris McCollum, one day in a meeting, I thought I would spit a little bit of game on my technical knowledge. And Chris goes, "You know what you are? You're strategically incompetent." And I said, that's one of the nicest things anybody's ever said to me. And I'll come back to that here in a little bit when we talk about communication in the trades. But it really is something that I think, in a way, it's maybe held me down in some people's eyes, but it's also given me a leg up. Anyway, after high school, I worked to, get a college basketball scholarship. That was my ticket out of a small town, and played a couple of small ball college basketball in Kansas, then transferred to the University of Colorado. And that's where my life really started to change. I was tired of being broke. I was tired of not having the things that I wanted in life. I was tired of hearing my parents growing up saying, "We can't afford that." We got to eat out one day a year, and we would go to Burger King. But even when we would drive up to the big city of Springfield, Missouri, and eat there at the Burger King on South Campbell, my dad would say, "That soda, that pop," we called it pop, Coke, is a waste of money. And so we still had to get a water, and even though that was our one night out at a restaurant. And I just knew I wanted more. And so I started a door-to-door sales company, and I just taught myself rejection. And I didn't know anything about sales. I thought I hated sales. And I just said, you know what, if I'm going to work my way out of this, it's going to be up to me. And so I got an idea to start a pizza coupon direct sales organization. Took me about 6 months, signed up a local pizzeria, created a little coupon book on my computer, went to Kinko's at the time, and printed a coupon book, stapled it together, and started knocking doors, getting my teeth kicked in, learning about scripts. I still have some of my manuals today. I grew up in a Baptist household where we learned scripture. And so I started numbering those scripts. And before you know it, 6 months later, I'd written an 84-page training manual, recorded an audio training CD, and went and flyered the campus at the University of Colorado Boulder and hired 10 kids to go sell coupon books with me. And fast forward, the end of college, I had about 500 kids working for me in 7 states. I was having lunch one day with a guy that owned a bunch of restaurants I'd been promoting for. And he said, "Doug, what are you going to do now that you've graduated? You going to keep building door-to-door sales crews?" I had crews in 7 states. And I said, "No, they fall apart. Every winter, every summer, kids go home for school." And he said, "You want to open some restaurants?" So we opened 6 Papa Murphy's and 3 Subways. And one day my business partner met a guy that had an HVAC company on the golf course. I was very fortunate to have some money in the bank at that time, even though I'd started with $23, and got into HVAC in 2006, invested a couple $100,000, and became a general manager of a fledgling HVAC and plumbing business in Colorado Springs. And off to the races. I will say this, now that you kind of know how I got to this podcast, I was very fortunate when I started making money in college because I didn't go buy a fancy car. I didn't come from that life. I started setting up my college schedule so that every Wednesday I was done with class. And back in the 90s, every night there were infomercials on in the evening of guys like Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins, Jim Rohn, Wayne Dyer. And so I started setting on my schedule literally every other week. I would just get on a plane, and I used that revenue I was generating from my door-to-door sales, and I would go see the all-time greats. And that's where I just really kind of launched into the personal development movement, learning how to sell, learning how to influence, and seeing greats like Stephen Covey, Zig Ziglar, and all the other ones that I mentioned. Read a book, by the way, that changed everything for me called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Changed the way I thought, because I did not think about abundance growing up in that small town of Missouri. So fast forward, I know that you guys shared some of the things on the intro. I've had 2 different stints on the contractor side. I've been very fortunate to have had some national training opportunities with some major manufacturers. And I will say this, I love the trades. I'll wrap up my story with saying that the trades, especially the trades of HVAC and plumbing, have taken me to places in my life that a broke redneck country kid could have never imagined. And I think it's important to say to all of your listeners that we can become anything we want, but it's probably going to be the hardest thing that we've ever done. There is no easy way to success. You just got to outwork people and stick to it and know that the challenges are going to keep coming. I still have challenges in my life today, but I believe that our lives will be a reflection of how we respond to those challenges, not the challenges themselves.
That's a great segue there, Doug, and appreciate the history. It's certainly an impressive story and one filled with a very diverse resume. I want to go back to kind of the motivation. I mean, certainly a lot of people listening to this podcast never went to college, or, maybe they went for half a semester and dropped out when they figured it wasn't for them. What was it sounds to me like the primary gumption, if you will, like classes aside, and I don't know what your major was and if you really utilize that or not today, but like the outside of class thing, it sounds to me like you actually used your college experience more as like a live training ground for business more than anything else. What was it about you that like even encouraged that entrepreneurship? I mean, that's pretty out of the box thinking to be, getting students to work for you and building an empire of coupon books and everything else. What was it that was kind of driving that motivation behind you?
It's a really good observation, Nate, and I appreciate the question because, I've been in the trades now for the better part of 2 decades. I think this fall will be my 19th year. I like to say that I grew up with a chip on my shoulder as big as planet Earth itself, if that was possible. I was tired of people telling me I could never amount to anything. I was tired of people telling me that I could never have this or that. And it wasn't just about money. It was about, when I was in 6th grade, the number 1 athlete star in our town broke a backboard on a dunk in a sectional final game. And I looked at that person by the time I was in high school, and they were just back working in town. That person is successful now. And if they listen to this podcast, they'll know who I'm talking about. But in that moment in time, I realized that if I don't make different choices, I'm going to not fulfill what I had determined was going to be my destiny. I didn't know what that was going to be. I just know that I was going to outwork people. When I was at the University of Colorado, I would go out and run my business. And then I would, a lot of friends, were rich kids from SoCal, and they were out worrying about how to tie their bed sheets into a toga and go to the next party and stand on the next keg, which all sounds like a lot of fun unless you're broke. And those kids came from money. And so I just decided I was going to outwork those kids. And so in Boulder, Colorado, I would throw the window open. I would finish doing the books and all the stuff with my business. And then exhausted, I would throw that window open in the middle of the night and literally sit in my boxers at the kitchen table and study until 3 a.m. And I just outworked people. You would ask did I use my college degree? The answer is no. I can remember one thing from college. I studied business, marketing, management, and leadership. I remember one thing, and that's called a SWOT analysis. SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I can tell you this, to this day, now about 29 years later, I'm 49 as we record this podcast, that's the only thing I can remember. And quite frankly, I probably should have done more of those in my businesses, in my real career. But I think if I could impart anything to the listening audience today is you absolutely do not need a college degree. In fact, what we really need to do is work on not only being the absolute best technical skilled tradesman that's ever lived, we need to work just as hard, if not harder, on becoming the most effective communicator. Because if we're not working on the effective communication side of our business today, we are going to be left far behind, and we're going to be ended up working for companies that are probably not the ones that we had envisioned. Because if you're not an effective communicator, you're not going to stay on with the companies that are providing the 401ks and the health insurance for your family and the paid time off and the vacations and the performance-based pay, the new trucks, the fully stocked vans. You're not going to get that at the companies that don't have a focus on influence, communication, sales, and being effective in other areas than just the technical skills. Both equally important.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying there, Doug, and yet I wonder if there's a disconnect because, the trades is certainly no stranger to working hard. I mean, most of the people listening to this podcast, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Not Brian. He's
not
like
the
20.
Electricians. I mean,
not the electricians either. But
or the marketing managers, Nate.
No, yeah, I get it. There's a lot of hard work that's put on the front line. There's a lot of pride in the craft and all these types of things. And I think sometimes, the work hard mentality is limited in one sense to the mechanical aptitude. Did you get your 40? Did you get your 50? Did you get your 60? And it's 60 hours of just cranking wrenches and banging knuckles and 0 hours of working on communication and sales acumen and business development and all these types of things. So did you just naturally have that perspective that you needed, when you say I was just committed to working harder than anybody else, did you naturally have the perspective that meant not only would you do the mechanical side of things, whatever that was in your world, as much as you did the internal things, the communication, the business development? Or was that an epiphany that you came across somewhere in your journey that you said, oh, well, hang on a second, I can't just knock on doors 60 hours a week and expect it to magically get better. I have to do some type of internal development as well. What was your story and how did you come to that realization?
I think part of it was what I was filling my mind with. Before I go into that, Nate, I was just going to say, I'm glad that I didn't interrupt, because I was actually, and this probably wouldn't have been my best path, I was going to argue with the host because, you started down this path, and I'm glad I didn't interrupt. You started to share that we have the hardest working people that have worked really hard. And I do agree with that. Let's not make any bones about that. The people that are willing to get 140-degree attics, 20-degree below zero crawl spaces in the middle of the winter to risk life and limb to leave their family at home while they traverse a snowstorm in the middle of the night to make sure another family has heat. There is nobody harder working. There's nobody that puts themselves in more danger as they go and they start to work on electrical panels and circuits and all those things. The jobs that the men in this industry do are absolutely, no doubt about it, life and death. But I'm also going to have a real honest conversation with the audience today. And that is, along the lines of guys like Jocko and Goggins and those type of personalities, whatever you think your challenges are, I think you've got a little bit more in the tank. I think it was Goggins that said, when you think you're finished, you're only 40% of the way there. You mentioned the 60 hours, Nate, so I'll just use that number since you mentioned it. There's 168 hours in any given week, And so what I share with our audiences and the men and women that I'm in front of is that, what are your excuses? We can have two things in life, but never at the same time. We either have results or excuses. Now, if you're okay with where your life is, if you're okay with your home, with your car, if you're okay with what you've got in the bank and you feel like you're going to be taken care of for all time, then by all means, there is no obligation on this planet or in this life to do any more. But I don't think that's the kind of listeners that are listening to Waste No Day. I think the people that are logging in to listen to Waste No Day are truly about wasting no day. But it doesn't mean that they don't waste days. If somebody's out there turning wrenches and getting in crawl spaces and getting in sewers and doing all those things for, let's just say, the 60 hours a week, well, that means that they have 108 hours left, right? And so my question is, what are you doing with your 108 hours? I'm also a sleep guy. I've got an all-natural sleep aid, as you probably did in the intro. I was very fortunate. Partnering an all-natural sleep aid got us into Walmart, Walgreens, and CVS. And I know more about the human body and how much sleep is required. The fact is, by the way, I would recommend a book by Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep for all of you insomniacs out there like me. Read that book. I have no interest in that book other than it's the best book I've ever read on sleep. It's about 14 hours on Audible. Speed it up to 2x. You can get done with it in 7. Listen to it twice in 14 hours. But what I will say is if you're sleeping 6 hours, let's say that you need 8. All right, well, 7 times 8, let's just take away, let's round it up, say 50. Well, 108 minus 50 is what? I mean, let's just say we're at around 58 to 60 hours left. My question is, what are we doing with our 60 hours? If we invest time with our families, a couple of hours each evening, and I'm talking about quality time. I'm not talking about watching the football game. I'm not talking about Netflix and binge. I almost said the wrong one there. That one's cool. If you're doing that,
we need to make room for that too.
We can do Netflix and chill. We can do that with the significant other. All right, but the Netflix and binge, guys. Let's turn off the television and turn on Waste No Day. Let's turn on Tom Hopkins. Let's turn on Stephen Covey. Let's turn on some of the other great trainers and people that have created content for us to go and better our lives. The other question you asked me, Nate, is where does it come from? Where does the motivation come from? I think at some point we just have to get real with ourselves. I'm 49 years old, and I thought when I was 30, I'd be done. I didn't think I'd be working at 49, and somehow the last 19 years just disappeared. I'm now an empty nester, and I love what I do working in the trades. Zig Ziglar said, you can have everything you want in your life as long as you help other people get what they want. He also said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I know that sometimes I get animated, I get excited. Sometimes if the people that have seen me speak, they say, man, the dude is loud. I think maybe that comes from playing sports and yelling across gymnasiums and maybe cow pastures. But the fact is, until we get clear, right? As Simon Sinek would say, start with your why. Until we get clear on why is it worth it to us, until we develop this vision in our mind of where we want to go and how we're going to get there, we don't have to know every step, but we better know tomorrow, what am I doing? And it's one of the things that I love. I mean, I don't look me listening to Waste No Day as a chore. You guys get me fired up. Your guests get me fired up. The technicians, the electricians, the plumbers, the guys and gals that are on this show, from Cora Well to guys dropping, $7 million without a single discount. I think that was Mr. Arroyos, from
Daniel Arroyos.
Daniel Arroyos. I mean, you got people doing amazing things. So until we say, you know what, I'm not just talking a good game. I'm not just saying I want it. I'm literally willing to say, I'm going to get up on not a lot of sleep, and I'm going to work for 2 hours on a Saturday morning before my kids get out of bed, which means maybe you got to get up at 4 a.m. when you're exhausted. Maybe it means that you got to stay up after you put the kids in bed. Maybe it means that we've got to listen while we drive. Maybe it means that we've got to hold our own selves accountable, because what I know is nobody's going to do it for us. We can look to others for inspiration, but probably the last thing that most of us that are struggling need is another motivational speaker. What we need to do is more doing rather than listening, right? Put into action the things that we already know. Oftentimes it's not a knowledge problem, right? It's the matter of doing and doing it consistently until it becomes our own. And I'll say this to finish this little rant. I can kind of feel myself going on. Nate and Brian, what I would say is that it could take you 1 year of absolute madness of getting up early, staying up late, listening every moment, turning off Metallica and Britney Spears and Taylor Swift and your Tay-Tay and whatever else you got going on in that service van. And I would say, if you will make the commitment every day, every moment, from the time you rise, from the time you wake up, have your alarm be E.T. the hip hop preacher. Have that be some Goggins or some Jocko in your ear, or some Brian or some Nate. And from the time you wake up, put the earbuds in if your spouse is going to get pissed at you, right? Get in the shower, call that your shower time university. Start to get ready, get dressed up for success. Think about how you look, how you act, how you talk, how you speak. Get lathered up on your way in to the building. Tuck that shirt in, put that name badge on, get that beard trimmed, put that company hat on, and wear that logo like a badge of honor, and know whether I'm doing this for 6 hours, 8 hours, or 12 hours today, I'm going to give it my absolute best. And if you will do that, 1 year from now, we'll look up and be absolutely amazed at where we can be a year from now. But anything less than that, in my mind, is unacceptable. Don't tell me that you're not making enough money, or that you don't live where you want, or your kids can't go to the school that you wanted them to, or they can't have that backpack, because all of that is available. Ask Daniel Arroyos. Ask Andy Habaika Services. Ask these guys that are making $500,000, $1 million a year, working the same 8 to 12 hours, 5, 6 days a week, that other guys are working that 8 to 12 hours, making $50,000, $60,000 a year. At some point, we got to point the finger inward and say, nobody's coming to rescue me. My life is up to me. Nobody else. There's people, listen, no man is an island. Don't get me wrong. I've had things happen to me and I've had things go my way and have things not go my way. We've got to have people and mentors in our lives, but you are the average of the 5 people you hang around most. And if you don't have anybody in your life to look to, then my suggestion is put your nose in some books by Tom Hopkins and Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins, and maybe just get into the Waste No Day podcast every day until you become a completely different person.
Here, mic drop. I know it's a 2-parter, but let's just cut it there. Goodness. We went to lunch last week and we got, we had a good time. We went back and forth, and I was texting Nate earlier. I was like, this is going to be a great episode, buddy. Watch this.
I appreciate that, Brian.
Legit trainer. But no, you sound, you hear a lot of people talk like this. You see a lot of people post. All of a sudden, everybody's like a motivational speaker on social media. And we were talking about this on an episode not too long ago. It's like a lot of people who have never done anything are shooting you quotes to motivate you to do something, which, maybe they're just posting those quotes because, hey, it hit me hard and I want to share it with somebody else. But when you talk the way that you just went on about these things, it's very clear to me by the energy that's coming out of you that you have walked through these things. And probably the pain on one side of regret and also the pain of discipline, but also the joy of discipline. And I can hear it in your voice when you're talking that you can see the people we can't even see right now, the drivers of the trucks who are in the passenger seat of. You can see these people going down one path or another, and either the quote unquote comfortable, miserable existence that comes with not doing these things and the absolute joy of victory that comes with doing these things, to really just seclude yourself and cut out all the noise, the white noise. So many times in my life and my wife's life, we've disassociated from friend groups. We've just cut them off. We don't do that anymore. Like, we're moving on. We just had to move up a level, and maybe not even up a level, like great people oftentimes, but this isn't what we're doing anymore. Now we're moving on to something else, to something that we want more. And that usually comes with just what you said, your circle, your association group. It really is the biggest thing. But to say that you can now, in this day and age, it's not always been the case that you can say, I can't find my association group right now. Let me put some headphones on. Let me stick some little white things in my ears, and all of a sudden I can associate with whomever I want nearly on the planet, just like that. You said it well, Waste No Day. We're just actively looking for people like Doug here who we can drop into those earbuds of yours and fill your head with what we know is out there, right? With the kind of people that you should be hanging out with, but might not have the opportunity, right? You don't live where Doug lives. You're not here in Phoenix or in Lancaster with Nate, but we can drop them in your passenger seat and you can just fill your head with it and just tune out all the other stuff. Go home, be with your family. When you're not with your family, be with your association group that's in the pair of headphones, until all of a sudden you start literally attracting these type of people to you, which is what happens.
Yeah. You bring up some really amazing points there, Brian. It's like the reticular activating system will start to filter in the things that we believe. And if we're sitting here on this, listening to us in your earbuds today, and you're driving to your next call, and the last person told you they got to get 3 bids and they got to think about it and talk to their spouse, and they're not familiar with your brand, and somebody else will do it cheaper or half your price. If that's what you're focused on, that's what you're going to attract. And whether or not you believe in the law of attraction or the secret or, those type of things, I promise you this, what you just shared, Brian, you're going to continue to attract more of that into your life, right? We've got to find a way to control our thoughts. Science is sharing with us that we have 80,000 thoughts on any given day, and that 67,000 of those thoughts for all of us are negative on every single day. Number one, we've got to become aware of the science so that we know what our brain is doing to us. Our brain's doing that to protect us. Our brain does not want us to get rejected, right? I know you've had some people on here already talk about, our brains are wired from thousands of years ago to protect us from a saber-toothed tiger, and we became tribes, right? To protect ourselves. But the challenge is with what you just said, Brian, is if our tribe that we're with our company, leaves a meeting and is out there in the back smoking cigarettes, throwing stuff in the dumpster, not caring if we're re-inventorying the good parts. And then we're out there going, yeah, it's a bunch of crap. Yeah, I don't know. They just want us to sell more stuff and taking advantage of people. Well, I don't know. If that's true, then you need to find a different company, because the companies I'm talking about are talking about influencing people to choose a company that's going to take care of them. And you know what? The company that's going to take care of the homeowner and take care of the technician and take care of the people in the call center and the leadership, they're never the cheapest. Everywhere I've trained all across the country, every single city that I go into, the biggest companies doing the most work, in fact, usually dwarfing all of the other companies across that metropolitan area, are typically twice the price. You got one or two or three large companies that are charging the most and they're doing the most business. So if we're allowing our thoughts to say, well, the company that I work for is overpriced, well, guess what? You're going to prove yourself to be right. And I just say, look across the road at the biggest companies that are high of the price. If it's all about price and it's not about how we respond to those situations, then why is it that the biggest companies in town are gobbling up about 60 to 80% of the market share and they're the highest priced? We are inviting that negativity into our life, right? And so
Yep.
I think that, one of the things we have to do, and I will say this, Brian, another thing that you had shared, and I'm sorry, I get on a roll, man. The thing I think that, and I just mean on a rant, like sometimes I don't need to know when to stop.
Keep ranting. Let's go.
Brian, you shared about the people in the trades, and it made me think of my daughter, Jordan. She's 26 years old now. But what I used to share with her when she was in high school, because she got into that mode where she was really good and she ended up playing 4 years of school. And I'll brag on my child here for a minute. She won the Conference Leadership Award, went to Missouri Baptist University and won the Conference Leadership Award. But I'll tell you this, I was not easy on her. She comes from a divorced home. She's been through more struggle and strife. When I got divorced from her biological mother, she hasn't seen her biological mother in almost 2 decades. And Jordan got into this complaining, victim mentality. And I just said, Jordan, there is no referee that shows up at that game saying, ooh, number 32, I'm going to get her tonight. She's going to get in foul trouble early and I'm going to send her to the bench. It was the eye rolls. It was the reaching. It was the not blocking out. And then, I got to the point where I said, I got to make sure that my kids don't understand. And this applies to our audience today. I said that winning isn't everything. Wanting to is. I will be the proudest father on planet Earth if you go out there and you play like this is your last game you'll ever play. And I think one of the things that really bothers me about those of us in the trades is that everything is there for us. It's not going to be easy, but I like to say to every man and woman that I ever speak in front of, I can't want it for you more than you want it for you. That's the bottom line. Until we get committed to what it is that we stand for and how we're going to go to market and serve our customers, serve our teammates, whether it's our call center serving our technicians, whether it's our technicians being a servant to our call center. I know some of you probably just got the willies and the skin, goosebumps raised on the back of your neck. Guys, I'm telling you, we have to get committed to what it is that's driving us. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm telling you, you're getting really close. But now we've got to put it into action. We've got to say it 1,000 times so that when it actually has to be said in front of the homeowner, we are ultimately prepared. I used to share with my daughter, you show up, you tuck that jersey in, right? You pull that ponytail back, and every day you show up to play that game, play it like it's your last. And so I carried that over to our companies. I would say every day on your way in, make sure your mind is ready to serve one another within these 4 walls. And then once you get in that van or once you pick up those phones, make sure that you give that customer the best possible experience that they've ever had with a contractor. It is about ultimate preparedness. Dress up, show up, look the part, act the part, smell the part, bathe the part, trim your beard the part, right? I'm not saying you got to be clean shaven. I'm just saying it's got to look intentional in everything that we do. One of the things that I love that Zig said, and I used to share this with my team at my HVAC company all the time. I would say, Zig used to say that every word out of a salesperson's mouth should be scripted, but never should one word sound as though it is. I would like to wordsmith that today and say, let's just call the salesperson an influencer, right? I'm not ashamed of being a salesperson. I think there's professional sales and there's sleazy snake in the grass those salespeople that lie, cheat, and steal. I'm talking about a professional salesman that has mastered that side of their craft. I believe ultimate preparedness is knowing every single word that's going to come out of your mouth 5 seconds before it even comes to the tip of your tongue. When we get so good at what we're going to say when a homeowner says this, or a teammate says this, or a call center representative says this, then we're prepared. And if we're not sure and we feel our blood pressure start to rise and we're going to explode like a shaken up Coke can, then we're not ready yet. And that's going to take working on our mindset, overcoming those 67,000 negative thoughts a day, so that when we do get in that van or we walk into that training room, that we're prepared. Preparation doesn't start the moment that the meeting starts. It starts from the moment that you wake up. And quite frankly, it should have started weeks, if not months, if not years before.
I appreciate what you're saying there, Doug, and it makes a lot of sense. And I would love to continue on the line of thought there in terms of communication, and we'll get to that eventually. But before we do, I want to ask you a bit of a personal question, because, this is motivational. I love hearing it. You have passion in your voice. Our listeners are nodding their head, driving to their call saying, man, this is what I needed this morning, right? But inevitably there's a flame out somewhere. Somebody gets amped up. They're like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And they do it and they do it and they do it. And by Wednesday, they got hit in the teeth. And by Thursday and Friday, they're like, all right, I'll reset Monday. And Monday morning rolls around and a new podcast and a new idea, and the old is gone. Has there been a time in your life, or a couple times in your life, when you've flamed out, when you said like, all right, I'm going to be this, I'm going to change, I'm going to motivate, I'm going to do all the disciplines, I'm going to do the right things, the behaviors and all that. And it just, you got tired, you got exhausted, you got distracted, or a number of other things. Like, take us to a time in your life when that happened, and how do you recover from that?
Number one, if we think that hasn't happened to every single one of us and doesn't happen to this day, we're fooling ourselves. If we look at ourselves, Nate, and think, I'm the only one, listen, every situation is different, and everybody's upbringing and parents and brothers and sisters and circle of friends and companies, we're all different. And I don't want to be dismissive of anybody here. But yeah, I will say this. When I was 20 years old, my life in front of me, I started seeing this gal and made a poor decision. And before you know it, she's pregnant. And that's my daughter, Jordan. That's 26 years ago. And some terrible thoughts went through my head. But taking care of my own also meant shacking up with this gal and starting to live as a family at 20. And she had 2 different boys, ages 3 and 1, from 2 different men. And so all of a sudden, turning the age of 21, I had a newborn little baby blonde girl, a 3-year-old turning 4-year-old little freckled redhead, and the middle boy was Filipino, dark skin, dark eyes. It was not how I saw my life going, but because of my upbringing, I knew that I had to handle my business. And when I went and saw Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, they started talking about writing out a vision plan and getting clear on your goals, and then creating action steps and reviewing those daily. And what I realized in creating those goals is that one of 2 things was going to happen. If I would get up and read those goals, visualize what it was going to be like to live that lifestyle and how I was going to get myself out of this mess, then I didn't know how the next thing was going to happen. Lao Tzu, ancient philosopher, said that 1,000-mile journey begins with a single step. I just knew that next day I had to take the next step. Then I had some financial success. And all of a sudden, traveling the country, speaking, training 1,000 small businesses, mostly in HVAC, some plumbing, some electrical, and 7,000 technicians now to this date. And I was eating a lot of fried foods, drinking a lot of beer, enjoying some good whiskey and bourbon. And so all of a sudden I had the finances of my life solved. And now I put on 70 pounds. I was a shell of myself. I blew out a knee at a company picnic in a water fight with some installers. And all of a sudden, I was a shell of myself. Not to be too graphic, but a lot of us guys, I'll give you a little PSA announcement for all of the men listening. Go get yourself checked. Quit being a tough guy. At 32 years old, I had blood in my stool. Literally. I went to the restroom, had blood in the stool. I went to the doctor. I saw a female doctor, and she laughed it off and said, Doug, we women know what it's like to have a little blood in the stool. One little drop makes the entire toilet fill with red. So I went home and decided to be a tough guy. 3 days later, I almost died. 3 days in the ICU. I barely made it to a hospital here because I was a tough guy. It'll be fine. So why do I say this? no matter where you are in your life, you think you solve a financial challenge, guess what? Unfortunately, a health challenge is coming. You solve a financial challenge and a health challenge, a spiritual challenge is coming. You solve the spiritual challenge, the health challenge, the financial challenge, you got a relationship challenge. You got a spouse challenge. You got a significant other. You got a child problem. You got a divorce looming. What I can say is go read David Goggins. I would actually start with something like Living with a Seal with Jesse Itzler first, and then I would pick up David Goggins and I would move on to Jocko. I would also, if you're feeling really depressed, and I know this runs in the trades, my father committed suicide 20 years ago this fall. And it's amazing when I share that, how many men come up to me and say, either I was there a week ago, a month ago, or my brother or my friend or my buddy I served with took his own life. Get yourself some help. I would encourage you, stop being a tough guy. Think about what you're putting in your mind. Think about what you're putting in your heart. Think about how you're treating your family and your kids, because tomorrow's not guaranteed. I would just say that Goggins is going to share with us that the challenges are never going to stop coming. Health, relationship, faith, family, finance, right? I hear you guys talk about the 4 F's and sometimes 6 on the show here. Those are the things that I think I would like to impart to the audience. We've first got to get clear on those things and why we're working so hard. Otherwise, Nate, when those difficult times come, I like to call them the red arrows. The red arrows are never going to stop coming. If we're not prepared and we've not developed calluses on our mind, to borrow something from Goggins, if we're not prepared and those tough times are coming, make no mistake, that train's coming down the track and you don't know when it's going to hit you, but it's coming. If we are at least mentally prepared for those toughest, darkest times in our lives, then we at least have a fighting shot to overcome it. I've lost a service manager to his own hand. I've lost a comfort advisor to his own hand, former military sniper. I've lost another man. I mean, the list goes on. And I'll tell you this, talk to somebody. Get somebody on your side. If you're just hanging out with tough guys that tell you, don't be soft, call me. Look me up, and I know Brian and you and Nate, you guys are the same kind of guys. Brian, I hear you, and Nate, I hear you. Tell people, if you guys are struggling with this or you don't know how to put this together, DM me. I'll say the same thing. There's way too much struggle in the industry of the trades, and I just don't think it has to be that way. I think 10 hours of focused effort every single week, 10 hours of focused effort. I'm not talking about being distracted with scrolling on Reels or Instagram or having the television on in the background. I'm talking about there's just you and the notebook and the workbook and the audio or whatever you're listening to. Focused effort, 10 hours a week is 520 hours. You know, there's a 10,000 hour rule, but I'm telling you, you'll be amazed if you will study 10 hours a week, and every single call you run, get out of your comfort zone, because that's the only place growth truly happens, and just start practicing on real homeowners.
See, I think as, part of the half of the show here, Brian and I are show creators. We're content deliverers. And, as part of a content delivery team, we want to create a versatile product that has reaches and it, has an expanse in terms of the audience that it's bringing in, and has variety, so that we're hitting kind of all sides of things. And every Monday there's a new episode and a new guest. And yet, in many ways, it's also a disservice to the listeners, because every Monday there's a new episode and a new guest. And so every Monday is like a reboot on some new flashy toy or some new sparkling idea. And while it's really cool and it has a lot of really good application to a variety of the trades and the experiences and everything that goes into it, it also sort of promotes a variety of focus, which is not focus at all. And far better would it be for many of our listeners to listen to one podcast 7 weeks in a row than it would be to listen to 7 different podcasts 7 weeks in a row, or 7 different podcasts in 1 week, as I know some of our listeners do. And that's not me saying like, hey, pick one and stick with it. That's me saying like, understand that when you are spreading yourself that thin across different topics and different focus points and all these things, you're getting a thin result as well, because you're not being as intentional as you probably should be in the areas of weakness. To justify it by saying, oh, but it's a good thing to say balanced. It is. Yes, it is. But you're using that as justification to eliminate the actual accountability from the subjects and the subject matters that you're listening to. And I appreciate what you're saying, Doug. It's good.
Well, I think the kudos go to you there, Nate, because what you did is just kind of took a shot at your own platform here, right? You're saying, hey, we have new guests on every single week. And I mean, you guys have some of the biggest names in the industry, right? I mean, I've probably listened to the Chris Voss podcast, and then his son Brandon. And then I just think about, one of the guys that changed my life is Brian Tracy. And then you had Tom Hopkins on. I've been very fortunate in my life to get to know Tom a bit personally. You just kind of took a shot at your podcast, but I think you're absolutely right. I was at a Get Motivated seminar. Literally, that's what they used to call them, or I don't know, success resources. And they had Gary Vaynerchuk was on stage, and his message, he came out, and I'm telling you, he rocked the room. It was about 18,000 people. And he said, not one of you need to be here today. None of you need another YouTube video. None of you need another meme. None of you need another quote. None of you need another workbook. Just go. And I'll paraphrase now because this is a family show. But he said, what you need is to go do it, right? Get out of your own head. Quit feeling like you got to watch the next video, the next motivational thing. So to your point, Nate, I'll say this. I think that you and I and Brian can relate because we hear our audience members, whether it's people coming through our training programs or they're coming to your podcast. What we experience is people walk up to us, technicians, electricians, plumbers, call center representatives, HVAC techs, comfort advisors, and they say, this is life-changing. This is a game changer. And then we run into that person at the next expo. We run into that person at the next trade show. And sometimes those people dip down an aisle because they didn't want us to see them because it's been 6 months or it's been a year. And they made us promises and they said, this is going to change everything. And they're deathly afraid that we're going to walk up and go, how's it going? How are you doing? How's your business? How's your sales? How's your close rate? And so they dip down that aisle. And so I've gotten to the point where I never ask people how it's going. I just say, hey, it's great to see you. If they volunteer it, then I know they've been doing the thing. If not, I know that they're just at the next expo hoping for the next magic elixir. I can tell you what you shared, Nate, is what we all experience at the trade shows and the annual events is there's so many different great speakers, great content, great workbooks, great service processes, sales processes, leadership techniques, call center processes that all of a sudden, you know what happens? Nothing. We have all of this information. We come back and guess what? The phones are ringing and there's an upset customer and somebody wants their money back and there's a 1-star review and there's a technician that quit and a van that broke down and somebody got in an accident and somebody else, decided to threaten us and say, if you don't give me $1 more an hour or raise my performance-based pay, I quit. And life hits us smack upside the head. What I will say is you're absolutely right. If you were in Nexstar, if you were with Greer, you were with Cunningham or Crisara or any of them, and you would just take 1 year and absolutely master everything that they say, you'd be so much better than just getting a sprinkling of a little bit because it just becomes a jumbled mess. There are a lot of great programs out there, right? I could just go on and name them all. I'm very proud at this point. I really don't have any enemies in the trades. I think most of us are out there trying to do good work, trying to help others. I know there's a lot of talk about gurus out there these days. And I will just say this, most of the people that are being called gurus, if we would just master what they're sharing with that process from the time we do the call ahead to the time we knock on the door, enter the entryway, go down and diagnose the equipment, come back up. This is how we present. This is how we eliminate the objection. I like to call those areas of concern. Whatever it is, if we just focused on mastering those things, I think our lives 1 year from now, we wouldn't even recognize. But you're right, Nate. What we're doing is we're trying to find the next magic potion instead of putting in the real heavy lifting of just mastering one thing.
Mm. Well, Doug, it's something that you have been spending your life developing. And as we're bringing this particular part one of this podcast in for a landing, I want to give you the opportunity to share about some of those things you're doing with Synergy, and specifically the ability to focus in on areas of concern within your own life, your own style, your own career trajectory, whatever you're struggling with. Talk to us a little bit about what Synergy Learning Systems can offer to those who choose?
All right. Thanks for giving me that opportunity, Nate. And this certainly isn't going to be a sales presentation, but I do want to, before I do that, I want to just share one thing. If you have set goals, let's say that it's January 1st and you're one of the people that said, I'm going to lose 50 pounds this year, right? And you start to the gym. Well, the fact is that most of the gyms look the exact same way on March. And all of us that are at the gym consistently are really happy by the time springtime arrives because now all the equipment is open, right? So that's the mystery of the human experience. A lot of people say, define what it means to be insane. And I think all of us at the same time, all across the country listening to the show today, could say, doing the same thing over and over again. And I'll let the rest of the audience fill in the rest, expecting different results. Well, I've got a different definition of insanity, and that is finding something that works and stop doing it. And I think that's the one that drives me crazy, right? Whether you're in Lancaster, Nate, or you're down there in Phoenix, Brian, when we walk in and we work on these things with our team, if they would work so hard that these things that we're sharing with them become their own, then they're just coming in to refine that process. But most of us aren't putting in the heavy lifting. So if you've struggled with weight, with relationships, with spirituality, whatever it is, one of the things that we do at our live events is we talk about creating something called a legacy statement. And so I'll give you the quickest rendition of this. This is a spinoff. I've been a 7 Habits leadership instructor through Franklin Covey and the Stephen Covey organization for almost 15 years. I want you to write out in present tense what you would want the most important person in your life to say if they were telling the truth. Don't say I will. So let's say that, Brian, I believe your wife's name is Amelia, correct?
Yep.
So you would write out the role that you play as that of husband. The key person is Amelia. And then you would write what you would want Amelia to say about Brian if you were the best version of Brian. The best husband, the best provider, the best support system, the best, most empathic listener, whatever that is that you would want Amelia to say. It doesn't mean that it has to be true today.
Oh, thank God, the listening part.
And
We were going to miss that mark.
I can hear you laughing. So anyway, what we've got to do is get leverage on ourselves. And so write it from that person's perspective. And I promise you this, it'll sneak up on you. The emotions will sneak up on you. And when they do, you're onto something. And then I would recommend writing out 3 to 6 action steps in present tense. In other words, lie to yourself and write out the action steps that you would have to become that person for Amelia. Now, if you will do that every day when you wake up, and you will do that every night before you go to sleep, before you know it, those things will start to reveal themselves, not through magic, but because you focused on it. You start attracting those things into your life, and those things start to reveal themselves. And maybe, just maybe, you were not going to open the door for her. Maybe you were not going to take out the trash. Maybe you were not going to do those dishes or help with the laundry or actually get your shorts into the laundry basket. But that morning and the night before, you had said something about how you were going to be a better spouse. That will drive a different behavior. And over time, that new person will reveal themselves. So that's the number one bit of advice, because what we're talking about is, how do we break the cycle of saying, I'm going to do the thing? And then, like you said, Nate, we go 30 days, 60 days, maybe even a year. And then all of a sudden it gets hard. The wife is complaining that we're never home, that we're always taking on call. And then the men in our industry and women are now at a crossroads of, do I take the on call so that I can earn more income so that we can get that down payment for that house? Or do I get home so that she's not upset that I'm running on call again this weekend? It's almost an impossible thing. So we've got to open up the lines of communication. When you ask what we do, I like to summarize what we do. We create custom programs. And on part 2, we'll talk about how we communicate effectively by either reducing or eliminating conflict altogether, which what I've learned in my almost 2 decades in the trades is something that technicians and call center representatives absolutely love. It's been a game changer for many of them, but it's still going to be hard work and practice. What we do at Synergy is we work to solve the challenge of implementation. We'll talk about that in part 2. But what we do is, I got tired of seeing people say, this is going to change the game for me. I'm going to do it. And then, as I mentioned before, seeing them 6 months or a year, 2 years later, and them saying, I got off track. So what we did is we developed an online learning system with a 1-year path to mastery. And so what we do is we've created customized programs for the trades where we work every single week, an entire core program that is complete with KPIs. And so that we can measure our personal growth. We can measure our personal development. We can measure what we're doing as a service tech, as a call center representative, as a sales leader in our company, as a company advisor, or as just a member of leadership. And then every single week, because I know we get busy, I create weekly assignments, small, manageable, bite-sized, micro-learning chunks, 60 to 90 seconds in length, one for the presentation part of our process, one for the closing sequence, where we address areas of concern. Because guess what? Just like those red arrows in our life, homeowners telling us that they got to get 3 bids or think about it or talk to their spouse or talk to their neighbor or talk to their handyman or check on their finances or sleep on it, pray about it, think about it. They're not familiar with your brand. Guess what? It's never going away. It's never going away. And take it from Zig. Zig said every word out of our mouth should be scripted. I think Zig is just saying, how in the world do we run 4 calls a day, 8 calls a day at some companies? I wouldn't recommend that, but how do we do this for an entire career and not master what we're going to say in numerous ways every single time a homeowner says that? And if we know we're going to say that, or if we know they're going to say that, how do we not address those things and lay the groundwork so that when we get down to the end, we've already gathered, I'll call it ammunition, so that it's not the first time it came up. If the first time price, brand, bids, and stalls, whether it's an unavailable or an available party comes up, is at the end, there's things that we can do. But I would say on the next call, let's start laying the groundwork before we get there. So solve the challenge of implementation, ultimate preparedness, find a program, whether it's our program or any of the others that have amazing programs that are working for many, and just dive into it and absolutely master it. Once you've mastered it, then start quizzing the trainer, then start quizzing your manager, then start quizzing your service manager and saying, I am doing everything that is possibly can be done. I think we all share a friend in Sebastian over there at Rilla. No better way to measure what we're doing in the field than Rilla. So good friend of all of ours, I think, and what an amazing technology to hold us accountable. Lastly, by the way, I know that there's a lot of people that push back and go, I don't want to be recorded on a sales process or my service process. Then you don't want it bad enough. If you're worried about being recorded, I used to tell my guys, and this was before it really existed, I would say, you know, your close rates are down, or you told me that homeowner needed to think about it or sleep on it or pray about it or talk to their spouse about it, their neighbor about it. What happened when this, or this happened? Well, it's like Sebastian says, it's like trying to coach a game without watching it. So I would just have my guys recorded on their cell phone back in the day. What a miserable experience trying to listen to all those things. I mean, imagine, 30 or 40 guys recording 4 calls in a day, and it's not possible. Sebastian solved that for us. So I will wrap this up. I appreciate you guys allowing me to share a little bit about what we do. The way that we all solve the challenge of implementation is we work a little bit every day towards mastery in small, manageable, bite-sized chunks. Instead of trying to feel like we have to master our entire process on week 1, if we will take a little bit longer term perspective and say, I am not giving up, and I am going to work on this every day, every week, every month, without fail, and I'm going to see what happens at the end of the year. And I think you're going to be quite pleased at where you come out on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so good, Doug. And my encouragement to just kind of double down on that is like, don't wait for January 1st. Don't wait for some momentous day. Like, start now, this Monday, Tuesday, whatever day you're like now, start right now. And then on August such and such of next year, you can say, or September such and such next year, you can say, I have spent a year going deep in my career, in my knowing myself and knowing and overcoming my obstacles so that I could be better, so that I could be the person that I want to be, so that I could develop others around me, so that I could provide for those I love, so that I could become the man, the woman, the person that I long and know is living inside of me. Start today. Don't wait. Get it done.
Nate, can I say one thing as we wrap up? May I?
Of course.
I know we're running out of time. Nate, I want to give your listening audience a hard, fast, something that they can take with them today. My question would be, what are the next 60 to 90 seconds, word for word, that comes out of your mouth the next time a homeowner says, sounds great, I think we're going to use you. I tell you what, let me think about it, and I'll call you next week. The next time a homeowner says any form of, I got to think about it, why don't we just master that for an entire week? And if you work on that 2 hours a day, that's 14 hours this week, If that's enough, that's enough. But if it takes you 3 hours a day and you got to work on that 21 hours and you work 60 hours, if your time card says 60 hours, whether you're on hourly or flat rate performance-based pay, let's just say that for you to master it, you don't have a great memory like I don't. And it just means you have to work harder than the guy sitting across from you that picks up on things really easily. Maybe that means that for the next week, for you to master that one thing, that area of concern, that you'll never be tripped up again when somebody says they got to sleep on it, pray about it, think about it, that you know exactly what you're going to say over the next 90 seconds. You listen to them, you breathe a little life into that concern, letting them know that you heard them, that you didn't ignore them, that you're not dismissing their concern. And then you know exactly what you're going to say. And at least you now have a fighter's chance. At least you're trying, rather than walking out of there saying, okay, I'll email you. I'll call you next week. If you're tired of being ghosted and you're tired of people not returning your text message, your emails, and your phone calls, if you're tired of them not picking up the phone when you call, then I'd say this is our wake-up call to waste no day, to study. And if that means 1 hour a day, that's 7. That's 67 hours instead of 60. If it's 2 hours a day, now you work 74 this week. And if it takes you 21, well, now for a short amount of time for you to solve these difficult challenges that are never going away in our industry, then okay, well, now you got 60 plus 21 hours. You're going to work 81 hours this week. But this week, you're going to work 21 hours to master one single thing, like Nate said. And if you will do that every week, just wait to where you are 6 months or a year from now.
And why not? Because that person doesn't call you back. That person doesn't answer the email. That person doesn't answer your text. That person's gone. So imagine, how many times did you get that in the month of August 2024? How many times did you get that objection when it shut you down? And imagine getting a sale on every one of those. What does your paycheck look like this year?
Why do we live in fear? Why do we trade in everything that we were destined for in our life because we're afraid of that homeowner, Brian, that's never going to call us back? That we lost their respect when we weren't committed or passionate about the company that we work for, the logo we represented, the work that we do, the skills that we have, the tools that we bought, the way that we do our installs, the way we stand behind our work, the way we run our service. Why do we allow homeowners to direct the course of our destiny? And I'll tell you why. I know why. I've been studying this for 30 years. It's because from the time we were babies, we were conditioned that when somebody says no, don't ask again. We were conditioned when we joined the trades that we don't want to be in sales, that anyone who's in sales is a sleazy scumbag, snake in the grass, and we bought into that. The fact of the matter is, I personally know hundreds of men and women in the trades that are never lying, cheating, or stealing, that have mastered the communication side to go with their technical expertise. And those are the ones that are out there crushing it. And if we are allowing ourselves to believe that the Andy Habaikas of the world and the Coral Whales and the Brent Buckleys of the world, if we have allowed ourselves to believe that they are somehow making these incredible incomes and taking care of their families because they're lying, they're cheating, they're stealing, it's nothing more than a victim mentality. It's time for us to wake up and say, you know what? The only thing that separates me from them is, number one, they made a decision that they were going to get good at it. And number two, they stuck with it long enough until they mastered it. That's it. And if you think that the Corals and the Brents and the Andys and all those people did not come up on those mountains where they were depressed, where they felt like they couldn't go any further, they just had to dig down even deeper. And they had to figure out a way to get themselves lathered back up. And maybe it's a day off. Maybe it's the afternoon. Maybe it's a book. Maybe it's a podcast. But they said, today is a new day. Today is a new week. And these are all new homeowners. I'm going for it.
It's a great place to leave it there, Doug. Our guest today has been Doug Wyatt. It's been awesome to have you on. This is just the beginning of part one. We're going to continue the conversation next week as we focus in on a specific category that he is passionate about, and that is communication. But for right now, we're going to leave it with those thoughts. Thank you so much, Doug, for being on. Make sure that you check out Synergy. It is an excellent program for you to perhaps utilize in your field to help you learn and go deep on some of those systems. Synergy Learning Systems, that's at synergylearningsystems.net. You can find him there. And of course, you can also reach out to him directly. Thanks so much, Doug, for being on today. It has been awesome to have you on.
Thank you, guys. It's been an honor to be here. I look forward to part two.
Yeah, buddy.
That's a wrap for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed your time with Doug Wyatt. It was excellent to hear from him and some really good, accountable, practical things that you can be looking yourself in that rearview mirror right now and asking yourself some of these questions. Are you ready? Are you prepared to handle even one of those things and to become a master on it? One of the areas of concern in your own career, are you ready to look yourself in the mirror and say that you are a master on it? Or are you on the carousel of podcasts and episodes and just continuing to hit the spin button one more time? We encourage you, even if that means that you take a pause from listening to this podcast for a couple weeks, to go deep and to become a master and to find a subject or an area and overcome it and become good at that craft and an expert, and then find another one and keep going. We want to encourage you that because we believe that is fundamental to how you will indeed become a person who is wasting no day, which leaves us with our challenge to continue to wake up every single morning and choose to waste no day.